Hello and welcome to USA 2024 on the road. I'm James Matthews in a car park at Kinston Jet Center in North Carolina, awaiting the arrival of Donald Trump.
And I'm Yousra Elbagir in Dearborn, Michigan.
And I'm Shingi Mararike in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yousra, Shingi, welcome to the podcast. You're on opposite sides of the United States this week, yeah?
Yeah, so I'm in sunny Phoenix, which is the Grand Canyon state and slightly different to the north of England in a lot of ways.
Michigan has been interesting. The cars are big, the portions of food are big, and it's been a really cool time just speaking to voters here. And what keeps coming up is just how uncertain things are, how people feel quite nervous about what might happen and how it will directly affect them and their families.
It's interesting how open people are in conversation, whether it's the Border Force staff who are putting you through or it's the person you're talking to at Dobbins Lookout above Phoenix. People are open and fairly honest about how they feel about this election and the broader state of American society.
Are they loving that London accent?
Most of the time, yeah, it helps with trying to get voxes for sure. I just go, yeah, I'm from London, and they're like,
Yeah.
okay, we'll talk to you for 2 seconds.
Milk it for all it's worth. Yousra, we'll come back to you in a bit to hear more about your adventures in Michigan. Shingi, you've been in Arizona, as you say. You've been speaking with a group of voters who've been making headlines.
Yeah, that's right. We've been speaking to Latin American voters who make up 1 in 4 voters here in Arizona. And it's so interesting talking to people who are in the only swing state by the border, this borders Mexico, about their concerns around immigration and the economy. Those 2 things came up quite a lot.
Refer to the Google Maps, please.
There's no reception up here to do
it.
On Friday night, we went to Dobbins Lookout, which is about a 30-minute drive from Phoenix. It's a view overlooking the city that loads of people go to get a snatch of the sunset. It's very much the Arizona you might see depicted in popular culture. Lots of cacti, lots of rock formations. It's quite rugged and it's really scenic. And the people up there were from lots of different ages and demographics, which is, of course, a snapshot of wider Arizona, which has a high Hispanic population, but also is obviously white Americans here, black Americans are up there as well.
I'm voting for Donald Trump just because I want my future to be much more secure, much better.
There's a really interesting conversation I had with Jennifer, a 23-year-old who was engaged to be married not too far from the spot we met her on at the Lookout. And she said to me, look, I think my spicy at McDonald's is going to be cheaper with Donald Trump as president because that was the economic reality before inflation went up.
I for sure think that prices have gone up like crazy, and especially now that I'm wanting to get married and have kids, I definitely want to be able to go to McDonald's and afford like a hot and spicy for $1 like they used to be. I think another thing that was kind of like the deciding factor for me was I'm planning on getting married soon and having kids in the future, and I really do believe that right now, like let's say I had like a 1-year-old or a 4-year-old and they go to school, I just would not be safe with, I wouldn't feel comfortable with having them inside of the school system because they are teaching about like sex changes and a bunch of gender stuff that I don't think 4-year-olds need to know about. So yeah.
And would you say that, well, basically there's quite a few Hispanic people we've spoken to who are voting for Donald Trump. Why do you think he has appeal to the Hispanic community?
I don't know why you would have appeal to the Hispanic. I think just to people in general. I mean, I don't really think it's a culture thing, in my opinion, of course. I know everyone's different on that, but I just think, I mean, if you like the guy, you like the guy. I mean, and that's pretty much it. I know you don't have to agree 100% with it, but I mean, if I was Mexican, white, black, I think I would still have the same opinions regardless. So yeah.
Some days never get more complicated than a spicy and McDonald's, Shingi, as we both know. But tell me this, support for the Democrats, dropped under Biden nationally. Trump was hoping to do well with that group of voters you're talking about. Polling, though, shows he's taken a hit in the last week since the whole row over the rally in Madison Square Garden, the comments about Puerto Rico, and the general fallout from that. I wonder, is that something that people have been talking about?
So what we're getting when we talk to people is this kind of disconnect between the Trump rhetoric and how they feel about what's going on in their lives. In that conversation with Jennifer, I said, look, Donald Trump has been accused of misogyny, racism, and all these other things. What do you think about that? She turns around and says to me, you almost accept the Trump package now. But then on the flip side, we spoke to someone called Renee Roja. She is part Navajo. That's another big part of the kind of minority population in Phoenix, but also part Hispanic. And she said, look, I'm disgusted by his rhetoric, not just the Puerto Rican stuff, but more broadly how he talks about women.
I did vote Democrat, and how do I feel about Trump? He talks about women as if we're just objects, we're not people, we're just supposed to be just seen, not heard. That's not me, and that's not most women in America. And he's said things about, Hispanics and natives, and he has a thing to say about everybody. Everybody except himself. Republicans are everywhere. People try to think that it's just one set of people, but it's not. My grandmother's a Republican. She's Navajo, Other family members and friends, they're all Republicans, but half of them are voting Democrat this year. It's just because of the way things are kind of going in the Republican Party.
How does it make you feel that the Republican Party has headed in this direction?
It's sad. It's really sad. It hurts because, we put our trust in so many people in government. They should really talk to us, the individual, the people that they're representing, and know that they're hurting a lot of people.
So from voter to voter, it changes because each demographic is not a monolith. Each voter has their own complicated story and their set of thoughts about these candidates.
Is there any sign, I wonder, that Harris's recent Latino endorsements have changed the mood with people where you are? This week, Cardi B, Jennifer Lopez, and somebody called Bad Bunny. Do you know who that is, by the way?
I do know who Bad Bunny is. I can't.
You do? Oh, just me.
That much.
Well,
No.
yeah, they've all come out in support. Huge artists, all. Does that matter, do you think?
I don't think it does. Yeah, they know J-Lo. Yeah, they know Cardi B. But you get the sense that, as I mentioned a couple of times, the economic situation on the ground is one that is more important to them. The border is another issue that is more important to them. And actually, a conversation that I thought was quite revealing was a chat I had with a guy called Dane, named after a Great Dane, apparently, because he is 6'7".
He wasn't born 6'7", was he?
No, I was like, is that nominative determinism? But anyway, he had a sign, which was a Swifties for Trump sign, which was basically set up to try and antagonize Democratic voters who were at the polling center that he was stood outside of. He was handing out conservative voter leaflets, and he just said, Donald Trump relates more to the everyman, whether he's at McDonald's or in the garbage truck, whereas all these celebrity endorsements for Kamala Harris put her in a kind of different realm.
More than anything, I think he can relate to the average person better than Kamala can. I think that Kamala is a career politician, and if you go look at her record as district attorney, she was throwing people in jail for 20 years for weed crimes, and now she's trying to legalize weed. I was like, that doesn't make much sense to me. On something like that serious, I don't think you just flip an opinion like that overnight. But like I said, Donald Trump, I'm sure you guys have watched plenty of interviews of him. I think he's a funny guy. I'm sure you guys heard about the garbage comment from Joe Biden. Did you guys hear about that?
Yeah.
And what does he do the next day?
Yeah.
Gets in the garbage truck, right?
If anything, that's the one comment we have had on your J-Los and your Cardi B's and the kind of constant stream of celebrity endorsements. Otherwise, it hasn't really come up.
Interesting. There's a lot of talk about surveys, maybe too much talk, but I'm going to raise one. It was in the Los Angeles Times, done by the Florida International University. It was interesting for a few reasons. It showed that Harris had pretty much restored a lead amongst Latinos, a lead that the Democrats had lost under Biden. But what it also showed was that Latinos were shifting right on a number of issues. The economy, the biggest issue for them, 40% said that. Immigration, important too. More than a third supported stricter measures on the border. They agreed with Trump's plan for mass deportation. So there are Latinos voting Democrat, but who speak Republican on some of the big issues. That, I suppose, creates a potential for movement, hence the heavy lobbying by both sides on that particular demographic.
Yeah, that's right. And we've said it so many times, this election will be won and lost on some of the thinnest of margins, and just having a bit of a dent in certain demographics will help. here in Arizona, the conversations we've had, particularly one that comes to mind with Richie, whose parents came over from Mexico but are now citizens, and he is obviously, his name's Richie Garcia. He sees himself as a Latin American, but he represented that shift to the right when it comes to immigration, because I said to him, look, why do you think that more Latin American people are potentially voting for Donald Trump this time, even if it's incremental movements in the polls? And he said, I think it's because we are citizens, a lot of us, or we have been here for longer, or our parents have been here for a long time, and we see ourselves as separate from the people who are trying to cross into Arizona and the other border states, because we are Americans first.
Where your family from originally?
I'm actually Mexican.
Yeah.
So
Mexican, but born in Phoenix.
I grew up here, raised here, and my whole family comes from Mexico.
Why do you think an increasing number of Hispanic voters are turning to Donald Trump?
I think times are changing. So I think a lot of Hispanic community was very inclined to Democrat due to the fact of immigration status, all this stuff, right? So I'm already a second generation American, right? Meaning that I'm the first generation American, because my kids will be second generation, right? But I believe that immigration status doesn't really matter to me much anymore. You know, it used to matter to my parents, but my parents are citizens. That factor doesn't really play a factor in my life anymore. And I feel a lot of Hispanic people are going in that same route.
That shift to the right among Latin American voters when it comes to immigration is pretty apparent here. And that might bank Trump a few more votes and help his kind of broader coalition here in Arizona. And when you're looking at last time, 11,000 votes was the difference. You bank a few more of those right-leaning Latin American voters, then you might be over the line here.
After the break, we'll head east to Michigan. Yousra, you've been taking the temperature there.
Yeah, I've been speaking to students on campus about the issues that are determining their vote. And it's quite interesting. It's not all that you would expect, James.
Welcome back to USA 2024 on the road. From the deserts of Arizona to the Great Lakes of Michigan. Yousra, you went to have a look at the youth vote, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, younger voters, specifically students, are normally seen as more left-leaning and are a large part of the Democratic base. But not this time. I mean, there's definitely been some concern about the Democrats losing voters because of the war in Gaza and Lebanon, and the Democrats not being progressive enough on key issues around foreign policy in the Middle East. So we went to the Ann Arbor campus of the University of Michigan, which is west of Detroit. And it's this beautiful university town, exactly how you'd kind of envision it. You know, loads of students of all ages, professors and their families all kind of living together in this beautiful town with great restaurants, I will say. When we were there, we went to the main quad, which is called the Diagonal Gardens, and the student Democrats were setting up a stall. We spoke to Alec Hughes, who's the co-president of the College Democrat Society, and he was really confident.
What do you think is going to happen after voting day? Do you think Michigan could turn out for Harris? Or?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I'm very confident. Obviously, I have my biases, but we've seen a lot of enthusiasm here on campus. We had, I'm with our College Democrats chapter here, and we have a great base of volunteers. We've had great interactions with students, whether at their dorms, at apartments. We've had tabling going up basically since the first day of school all the way through election day. So we've been having great conversations with students. We've been registering students, particularly students from out of state that want to register in Michigan and that are able to, that are also Democratic leaning. So we've had a lot of good energy here, and because Ann Arbor is such a blue area, so much of the obligation falls on us to not just convince students, but to actually turn them out to vote.
So there were plenty of people stopping at the stall. They'd basically hand over a token that showed that they'd voted early, and they'd get a cookie, and the cookies were they looked really good. I mean, we were tempted, but we didn't ask for one. But, we did ask people about how they felt about the election. Mostly, we felt a lot of excitement, especially from first-time voters, like that thrill of getting in there and making your voice count.
It was really, I really had a fun time getting to go vote.
I put my voting sticker on my laptop.
Me too.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah.
But there was also this kind of underlying anxiety. I mean, one young woman just straight up was like, we're scared.
I mean, as young women, it's scary to have the thought of him being the president because it's threatening us.
I also think it's just scary that the sides are so divisive. Like,
Yeah,
that they're
that.
so polarized that you also have to be all of one thing or nothing of the other. That you have to somehow make all of these choices grouped into one candidate, and I think that's actually pretty frightening.
We're both in our late 20s, and I think the students who are like are they Gen Z?
Yeah.
Like they've had to endure, I think, a lot more in their day-to-day lives, whether it's like gun violence or climate change. And so I think inherently, just my opinion is that they've grown up to be like more engaged.
There was also this weird thing about them not using the name Trump. You know, they just like, it was like Voldemort, he who must not be named. They kept skirting around actually naming Trump and saying, well, if the other candidate comes in, we don't know what he'll do. And when I actually did ask a first-time voter about why she wasn't feeling comfortable criticizing Trump openly, she was like, well, we don't know how people might react, even in a very blue campus in town.
Interesting. Did you hear from young Republicans too?
We did. We went to a student bar called Good Time Charlie's. And it was exactly how you would expect a student bar to be. It was just like way too loud. You know, people just coming in ready to start the weekend, even though it was Thursday. Thirsty Thursdays, as they call it. There were these guys at the bar. They were very quiet. They weren't imposing. They were all auto body mechanics. And the guy we first spoke to, Joseph, he just was like, we just want the economy to improve. He said he hadn't voted before, even though he was 22, and he said,
this year I am compelled to vote for Trump. Turned 18, didn't feel compelled to vote. I'm 22 now and I feel compelled to vote because when I was a kid, I remember how things used to be under a Democrat or a Republican, and how things are under either one of them is not the same anymore, and I don't think that the government is what it is.
Like work, there was way more work when Trump was in office, and a lot more gas was cheaper. Inflation wasn't, it was like no inflation.
I just want the ads to go away.
This one was, sorry?
The ads, there's too many ads.
You feel like you're bombarded
it's
by
overwhelming.
campaigning. Yeah. So we're heading to Saginaw County, which is a swing county in the swing state of Michigan. And it feels like, with how close this race is, this is the place to be right now.
Yeah, we're driving north from Detroit, away from quite a blue metropolitan area into an area that's completely split. And I guess, Yousra, we're going to try and tease out the issues that matter to young voters here and to try and find out more about why it is there's such a close divide in this particular county.
It's interesting that with Saginaw, I mean, everyone they voted for in the last two elections has won. So they voted for Trump in 2016, then Biden won it in 2020 by just over 300 votes. So if we can get a good indicator of how Saginaw is going to vote in this election, we might be closer to figuring out who's going to be the next president of the United States.
So we went to Saginaw Valley State University. We've seen so many campuses at this point, but this was quite impressive. They had a really beautiful sculpture park. It was sprawling, and in a city that's actually not that big. It was really it took up a lot of space. And we met Riley and Noah.
So we're going to walk. Cool.
So Riley is the vice president of the College Republicans, and she's a political science student.
I'm extremely excited. The polls are deadlocked.
And Noah is the president of the College Democrats, and he's a political science student.
Yeah, it really could go either way.
And we're on really good terms. It was so cool to see how healthy their relationship was. They said they host events together. They're like very much engaged in this inter-party dialogue between the two of them.
I think Trump is a
they were so passionate about the politics that were coming into play in this election and the issues that concerned the party, but also the students on campus, like abortion rights, like, with Riley, illegal immigration when it comes to like competition over jobs. But both of them were moderate.
So who do you guys think is going to win?
I genuinely have no idea. It's hard to tell when the polls have been deadlocked for a week now.
Yeah, it's really, nobody can say for sure. The one thing I don't see happening is a Trump landslide, but other than that, Trump could narrowly win, Harris could win by a little or a lot. Nobody really knows.
I think Trump is a strong reflection of where the GOP wants to be right now in terms of extremely strong legislation that's going to take care of issues like illegal immigration, the economy, and such. And I think the big one is the economy for Americans all across the board, young students all the way to voters in their 80s.
Thanks, guys. So I'm crying.
You're good.
It's all 'cause I wanted to say.
A recent poll showed that Harris effectively tied with Trump among Arab Americans, leaving her nearly 20 points behind Biden's numbers in 2020. There was another poll showed Trump with a slight lead. Now, we've heard from Arab American voters throughout our coverage of this election campaign, saying that they basically feel stuck. They don't believe either party really represents their interests. I wonder, Yousra, did you find that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that feeling of stuckness is definitely coming up. I think most Arabs here feel completely unrepresented in this election. They feel like they're torn between either voting for a candidate like Harris, who may cover some of the issues that concerns them, but not the issue that's most directly impacting their community and their lives, or voting for someone like Trump, who has put a ban on Muslims from entering the country. So it's not really a good selection of choices for them. And we spoke to Lina Azim, who is a Sunni student that we met on the Flint campus, who works in advocacy for the Arab American Heritage Council. And she told us that the war in Gaza has not only made these issues around representation so stark, but it has also caused rifts within the community that she works with.
So I think recently, especially after there were like certain debates and people multiple times have asked both sides what their views are on things like the war in Gaza, other political issues that are important to the Muslim community, that there's been a lot of there's been a lot of maybe misconceptions that people are now switching sides and voting for Trump because there hasn't been a clear response from Harris on how there's a plan with if she were voted and what her administration would do to end the war in Gaza. But I wouldn't say that's true. I think in my day-to-day conversations, knowing like the broader community here, especially the Muslim community in Michigan is very big, especially in the areas like Dearborn. And so I would say that it's really, people are just confused. They're in a difficult position. I think this year is different than a lot of years in that they really don't know how to. I've had people tell me like, I don't know who to vote for. Like I just don't know because it feels like no matter what I do, I'm doing a disservice to my community, or I'm putting people in harm's way. And so like I would say that right now the feeling is just like confusion, concern, like somewhat helpless, but I would also say that a lot of people are now doing research on other candidates and seeing maybe with like other parties, like the Green Party maybe, where they can find, people who are more representative of their views and the change that they want to see in the future.
Yousra, there's a question I want to ask you. You're Sudanese, and your coverage of your country's civil war, it's been out on its own, compelling, shocking. And I ask you this because of the talk about civil unrest here in the United States, without being alarmist, because it is part of the discussion. I just wonder what you think when you listen to that conversation here.
It's actually not that shocking to make the comparison, James. There are similar components. There's the fact that there's a lack of choice for some people here. There's the fact that the rhetoric has become so violent and divisive from Trump that he's threatened to bring, the National Guard into the civic space. There's the fact that there is a lot of hate kind of simmering underneath. There have been these outbursts of violence that have come up in this election. So even though we have this kind of surface template of a, developed nation, a global power, there are these similar factors underneath that I can sense create kind of this recipe for very abrupt, violent escalation with the precedent of January 6th, where I don't think that people are completely overreacting to feel that nervousness, to feel that kind of anxiety around threat of post-election violence.
Now, before we go, let me ask you about one thing. Saturday Night Live is, of course, a US institution, comedy show on network TV. Last night, as we speak, Kamala Harris was on it, and she had somebody impersonating her. Did any of you see it?
Yeah.
I saw a clip, so I want to watch the whole thing.
Yeah, I wonder, a risk, isn't it? A politician at this stage of the game kind of rolling the dice on national TV in a comedy show.
She's been very clear that she wants to do that kind of relatability thing, that she wants to be kind of at the forefront of the young vote. I mean, you remember the Brat Summer, Kamala's Brat. There's all these signs that she wants to be on the world stage as someone that can be relatable to people from different age groups.
Yeah, and one thing I'd say is it's so interesting seeing those sorts of spaces occupied by a politician, be it Club Shay Shay with Shannon Sharp or that yesterday, the SNL. They are cultural pockets which she feels she can exploit and use in a way that I find quite interesting, particularly off the back of having covered a UK election, which is in a lot of ways quite straight-laced and quite buttoned up. This is an element of her campaign that is interesting, the Brat Summer coming out to Beyonce's Freedom. There's an expression to it which she obviously thinks will yield votes too.
Grand. Of course, you realise we're talking SNL because the producers of our podcast, they like to introduce a bit of levity to finish. And the question I have to ask both of you, I'm told, is who would impersonate you on SNL? Shingi, you go first.
I can't think of anyone whose hair is long enough off the top of my head, so I'm going to go with Denzel Washington.
Denzel, get you. You know what I think?
Oh, good one.
I think maybe a younger and better looking Snoop Dogg. Surely.
That actually probably works.
Oh, well, I'll take that. And Yousra, what do you think?
I still don't know, but I'm going to say Ayo Debiri, only because I really like her. But I don't know if we have any similarities other than her very good taste in clothes.
We're with you on that.
Yeah.
Clearly, we were gauging opinion before we came on. The cameraman, he said to me, either Harry Hill or Jason Statham. So I
think Jason's a good one.
Jason, I'd settle for that. Yeah, I might have to lose a few pounds first.
When you do your doorsteps, you're probably like Jason Statham. You kind of,
yeah, the stealth. The stealth is there, Jason.
Less threatening, I hope. Yousra, Shingi, many thanks indeed. And thank you for listening to us on this edition of USA 2024 On the Road. Hope to speak to you tomorrow.